making things again, Daddy?
I'll start off by using this special wood jig I've made that fits my machine vise, and I'm drilling a 1/4 inch hole through these little offcuts of English yellow boxwood. It's a 1/4 inch drill bit because that matches my pen mandrel, which is 1/4 inch diameter shaft on that. And you could use this jig for doing pens or anything. Here's the pen mandrel and a mandrel saver, and just slotting everything onto the mandrel. Got spacer, boxwood, spacer, boxwood, another spacer, then bring up the mandrel saver and tighten up the tailstock. And here I'm turning it to round using a spindle roughing gouge. Boxwood turns absolutely beautifully, it's lovely. Get fantastic finish on it, and it just turns like butter really. I'm just running backwards and forwards, bringing it to round. Make sure your tools are sharp, ride the bevel. Just almost there. Here I switched to my spindle gouge. It's a 3/8 spindle but gouge, and riding the bevel and going downhill on the grain all the while. Make sure you're always cutting downhill. You can see how clean the cut is I'm achieving. It's got quite a sheen to it. Just riding the bevel and gradually removing the stock to get the shape that I want. I'm going for sort of an egg shape, but by doing it this technique on the pen mandrel, you can use very small pieces of wood and offcuts which you would otherwise not be able to do much, because you would lose some of the wood by putting it into a chuck, or they're perhaps not quite big enough to use a glue block on. Just rubbing the bevel, running downhill. I don't have to be overly careful about the shape because there's going to be more finishing done on these later. It's just the first stage. I was quite enjoying doing this because I haven't done a lot of spindle turning for a while, and it was lovely turning this boxwood. Here I'm refining the shape a little bit and just doing the final cuts, getting some lovely shavings. And here I'm using a parting tool, and I'm starting to create the little recesses that I'm going to put the Milliput into. Just making sure I'm getting nice clean entry cuts on these. Very sharp parting tool, as you can see by the shavings that are coming off. But, just doing a series of these little rebates or recesses, and they're about 1.5 widths of the parting tool wide. Just making sure they're nice and clean, so I get a nice clean line when I put the Milliput inlay in. Now the rebates are cut. I'm using some black Milliput epoxy putty. You mix equal quantities of part A and part B. Mix it very thoroughly. I missed out the mixing bit. Then I'm gently packing it all into the recesses, making sure there's no voids. I'm doing this on the lathe because it's easier really with little items like this. The lathe holds them for you. I'm just packing it all in gradually into every groove and stuffing it all in well. We've just got to make sure there's no voids left anywhere. Takes a bit of time, but here it is all done. It's on the lathe and set, and now I'm going to start cutting it back for the reveal. This is the satisfying bit really. Using my spindle gouge again, just to remove the bulk of it. Just running backwards and forwards there, just to get down so that the Milliput is then flush with the boxwood. Just takes a little bit of time. I've cut the Milliput back so it's flush with the boxwood, and I'm now just refining the shape using my spindle gouge to start with, and just making sure that I've got no big ridges. And then I'm switching to skew chisel, very sharp skew, and I'm using that as a negative rake scraper just to get a nice contour so that the Milliput and the boxwood are exactly flush on the surface. I want it to all be amorphous, all one level. I don't want the Milliput grooved. I'm just refining the shape using the skew. The big flat cutting surface on the skew makes it much easier to get that lovely flush surface. Just sanding it now. It doesn't need much sanding. Sand it up to 1200. You get such a lovely finish with the boxwood and the Milliput using the skew. Just use a cloth to get rid of the dust, and then I'm putting some melamine lacquer on these, which gives a good durable finish. Makes it pop. Really brings out the colours nicely. Then using my Robert Sorby Zero Jaws, and I'm putting this sausage of Milliput, leftover Milliput in there, and just creating a little hole in the end with the corner of my skew, which will help me drill out the centre. Just truing it up a little bit. Move the tool rest out of the way, and then I bring up 2.5mm drill bit in my Jacob's chuck. Turn the lathe speed down, and I'll just gently advance that in and out. You do this at slow speed, otherwise you will overheat the Milliput. I had to re-tighten the Jacob's chuck here. I hadn't tightened it up enough. The drill bit just spun a little bit. But keep backing in and out so you clear the swarf. Drills like butter, and it really is lovely. Keep hold of the Jacob's chuck as you withdraw it, otherwise there's a danger of it pulling out of the tailstock and forming a hazard. Bring the tool rest back up now and start contouring the end cap. I'm using a special tool for creating tenons here, so I've got the exact 1/4 inch size on the. It's a Robert Sorby sizing tool. It's connected to a parting tool. Just adding some contour onto the end of the cap using my skew. Just making it a nice smooth shape really. And here I'm just sanding the end cap up to 1200 to get rid of any grooves. It sands beautifully, Milliput. And I then use a little bit of burnishing cream, chestnut finishes burnishing cream, and that brings it up to a very high polish. It's great stuff, burnishing creams on plastics and things like Milliput. But I'm just buffing that. And that's looking good to go. Bring up the tool rest, and I'm then going to part off. I'm just using a sharp parting tool, and it cuts like butter. It's very easy to part off. But, just got to make sure I catch the piece. and there it is. Just test fitting it. Hello everyone, another very sunny day here in Hampshire, very hot, and just going to show you the latest project. This was a very quick and easy project, and it's a light pull which I'm calling the Bumblebee Light Pull for obvious reasons. I've just put one on a piece of light pull cord just so you can see how it all works, and it's English yellow boxwood with black Milliput, and it comes up to a very high polish. Boxwood is amazing how the finish you can get on it, and so's Milliput, and that's been finished with some melamine or melamine lacquer, a couple of coats of that on there. I've made a little cap in the end so that the knot's got something to bite up against, so you've got 1/4 inch holes right the way through, and then I've made these little black Milliput caps, and they were made out of a roll of leftover Milliput, which I actually put on the lathe. And here's the other light pull I made. If I pull that out, you should just be able to see the little cap, and there's a hole running through that, and that's a 2.5mm hole, which would probably be better off being 3 because it's a bit snug. And what I'll do is epoxy that into there like so, and there we are. There's my 2 Bumblebee light pulls. You probably noticed I was using these 0 jaws for turning the Milliput, and these are fantastic. I use these all the while for little jobs because, as they say, they close down to 0 just about. Yeah, I think you've got about a 4mm hole in the middle, but you can grip just about any offcuts, little pieces and dowels and things like that, and they're just brilliant. And they haven't got any sharp edges either to catch your knuckles if you're working close to the chuck jaws. You can also use them to expand into things, if you're trying to reverse a bowl or a small bowl or goblet. But I use them just for turning small things like dowels and caps. And the light pulls, I used my pen mandrel. These are 2 Morse tapers on each end, and that's a mandrel saver, and that goes into the tailstock, and the mandrel slots on there. Much better doing it that way rather than trying to tighten up onto the end of these rods with the brass nut and everything. And it's a bit better now the sun's gone in. You've got these spacers on here, and what I did was put I had these little scraps of yellow boxwood left over from a knife project, and I put those between the spacers, pushed the tailstock up to grip them, and then turn them. Well, that's how I did that. So I used funnily enough, I don't think I've ever turned a pen, but I used the pen mandrel for all manner of other things. Here's another example of something I've turned using that technique. This is a piece of Banksia pod, and I cut the Banksia pods into 2 or 3 sections, drill 1/4 inch hole through the middle of each section, and mount those on the pen mandrel and turn them, and you can make these little Christmas decorations and things. And this is African blackwood, which I cut the finials from, and I turned those with the African blackwood mounted in my 0 jaws on the Robert Sorby Patriot chuck. So that's another example. Now the boxwood, the yellow boxwood, was left over from a very early knife making project of mine, and I actually did layers of boxwood and African blackwood to give this sort of bumblebee effect, but doing it like this, much easier, and you get beautiful clean lines like that. There we are. Thank you very much for watching. Only a short video today. Thanks to all my subscribers, and hopefully I'll see you all back soon. Cheers. For more detailed information on mixing and using Milliput, see some of my earlier wood turning videos. There's a bit more detail in those.
coming soon.